Hey everybody, Movie Reviewer Next Door here, and I'm back with another review, and this is one I've been wanting to do for a while. Mostly because I'm kind of tired of just sitting there and saying nothing about it. I know not everybody's going to want to hear my opinion on this documentary, and I'm going to start this off by saying everything I say is completely my opinion. I have not been brainwashed by some cult into my opinion of this film. If you dislike it, um, I hope that you will give fully reasonable reasons that you don't like it, and I hope that you will not lie about it, as I am not going to lie about what is in it. The film I'm reviewing today is What is a Woman? This is a 2022 documentary film directed by Justin Folk, and it's about literally Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire travels around the world to ask one of the biggest questions of this generation. Now, before I get into my opinion of this and discussing what happens in it, for the most part, I'm going to say right now, if you see this video and you're thinking of commenting, making threats against me for my opinions on certain things and around the transgender ideology or around transgenderism as a whole, or any of the different hot button issues discussed in this, if as long as you are civil in the comments, I will be civil with you. If you attack me, I will attack you back. I'm tired of being a doormat. I'm tired of having to go along with everything else, acting like everything is fine while someone is disrespecting me. As you shouldn't either. I am not going to start arguments, and if we can just have a very civil discussion without turning into name calling, like calling me a transphobe or calling me homophobic, even though I'm literally gay. Don't have to go far to find that out. Literally, I don't make that a big thing on my channel, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of obvious just looking at me. But yeah, I enjoyed this documentary. I did. And it's hard to give a number rating on this. I gave it a 10 on Letterboxd, partially for the fact that it's one of the only documentaries, I'm pretty sure the only known documentary that attacks the transgender issues from the other side. Because you get a lot of other documentaries that are like, oh, everything's perfect and you have nothing to worry about. And I'd say if you're going to do a film on that or a documentary on that, you should be very upfront and honest with the people who are either thinking of going through gender change or sex change surgeries or thinking of just wearing clothes and identifying as another gender. I think you should be upfront and brutally honest with them instead of just trying to make them think, oh, yeah, you'll love it. It's going to be perfect. Because it's not. I'm going to say up front a couple things from my side. Do I believe that transgender people exist? Yes. In the context of I do believe that gender dysphoria does exist and that it is a legitimate condition, and there are quite a few people in this world that have it. Do I agree with the social contagion that TikTok has created around transgenderism? Fuck no. Teenagers going on TikTok, seeing other people talking about if you're misunderstood, do this and you'll be understood. You can kind of make the same argument for cigarettes. Like, oh, if you smoke cigarettes, you're cool. No, you're not. It's okay to smoke cigarettes as long as it's your decision and you're not being brainwashed into or forced into doing that. But the transgender, the stuff I support involving that is people who legitimately feel in the wrong body. I have felt this way before. I got help and I realized, no, I'm a guy. Am I saying that other people who realize that there's something else are crazy? No. I'm not. There are demented people in all different walks of life. Acting like every person that identifies as transgender is perfect would just be a straight up lie. Acting like every gay person is perfect is a straight up lie. And acting as if everybody in any walk of life is perfect is a lie. You can say the same for, are all people bad in a certain group, like certain people saying all cops are bad. You can't in good conscience say that because you don't know all cops and you only possibly know a couple cops that you've dealt with personally because certain areas are more corrupt than others. But on the topic, I do believe transgender people exist. I do. But I do not agree with children transitioning under any circumstance. I believe that children do not have the capacity, and I'm not saying children are stupid. Children can be very bright, can be brighter than many adults nowadays, probably due to the shitty school system or education system. There are a lot of very fucking smart kids, but I do not believe for a fucking second that, as some of the people in this documentary say, that 4-year-olds, especially that was very alarming to hear, can know that they're another gender because most of them can't grasp the concept of gender. And do I agree with trans people in do I agree with trans men in or trans women in women's sports or trans women or trans men in men's sports? No. I think there's an unfair advantage on one side or the other. If you have trans men going into men's sports, they aren't going to have the testosterone to keep up. And if you have trans women going into women's sports, not just the testosterone, but the body structure, the muscle fibers, and all of that are completely different. And to act like men and women are equal in any way, in especially in body structure, would be a lie. But before I go further with what is talked about in this documentary, I mean absolutely no harm. I'm just tired of having to censor myself like I have online, where people berate me, call me names, transphobic, homophobic, again, because I even dare to question anything that that side says. I have met some wonderful transgender people. I really have. Some of my best friends are that, and I love them. But does that mean that I'm just going to ignore a lot of complete horseshit that happens nowadays surrounding that issue? No, I am not. So, this documentary is basically Matt Walsh going through, and also through this video, I'm going to be talking about a lot of pivotal events in the documentary. This is a hard watch, especially at many points, is a very hard watch because a lot of the information in it is very disturbing. It is true information. Um, and I'm going to try my best to keep it together because this is an issue I'm very um, passionate about, especially on the term of children, on that end and the sports end, as I do know people involved in both of those. Um, the first thing I have written down, there is the first person that ends up coming up. This entire documentary is framed around Matt Walsh walking around trying to find out an answer to a question, a simple question. What is a woman? Uh, and he goes to a bunch of different people in order to find the stuff out. Excuse me. So the first person he goes to is a gender affirming therapist named Gert Comfrey, who um is non-binary, I guess. Not sure not really any of my business. Uh, but apparently this person talks to kids that are thinking about going through sex change surgeries and basically evaluates to see if they are mentally stable enough to do it, which has always been a thing. It's been a thing since the 70s with transsexualism, um, like with films like Silence of the Lambs, the main villain being denied a sex change surgery because he was deemed mentally unstable. That is a real thing. Um, it is a thing you see in a lot of movies, and those movies often get labeled as transphobic, which, no, they're not. I'll have to review Dress to Kill again. I love that film. But this person, Comfrey, comes off as very deranged in their speech. Um, Also, I'm gonna try my hardest, but like, I don't usually bother with pronouns. I just call people by their names. If I ever do, I'm going to just, for the most part, say their name because I don't want the backlash, and I'm tired of dealing with people giving me hate for something that is literally a human mistake. Um, this person goes on to talk about how um, every child knows what they are from birth and that they come to them to basically, again, affirm their gender, which, if anybody here knows what a therapist is supposed to listen to your problems and help them go away. Change your way of thinking in a way that is beneficial to you. By putting the terms gender affirming in front of that, that is insinuating that they are going to push for that. Because, again, and I'm going to say this because I know it's true, when they do that and push someone into getting these sex change surgeries, they make quite a bit of money off of this. You could say the same thing for normal therapists. I don't love the therapy business. I don't think it's a very valid business, and I think that if anything, people should talk to, like, there are benefits to talking to a random stranger. I tried it and I didn't really experience much change. I know I'm just one person. I can't speak for all gay people. I can't speak for all people in general that have gone to therapy, but it just something about it came off as a little weird. Um, the next person he goes to is Dr. Marcy Bowers, who is a very well known. She's one of the leading sex change surgeons, and uh, she she is a transgender woman. If this name sounds familiar to people in the transgender community or to people who watch TLC, she was associated with Jazz Jennings. Who is Jazz Jennings, you might be asking? She is one of the youngest, she is one of the most popular underage sex change surgery patients whom Marcy Bowers worked on. And the entire, I hate that show with a passion, I Am Jazz, because it feels very clear to me that the parents are doing this in order to stir up publicity. They love the attention, and it does not, there are multiple moments in the show, in clips that I have seen, that have disturbed me, especially dealing with Jazz feeling still like she is in the wrong body. And like, the most disturbing clip, other than her coming to her mom and saying, I don't feel like I'm in the right body, I want to go back, and the mom just being like, no, 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 it's okay, honey. That is child abuse. Your child is reaching out to you for help, and you are denying that child help. You should be locked the fuck up. I know I am not a parent, but that angered the shit out of me as someone who knows people who are in the detransitioning community, someone who is very for it, especially if you feel that your life is in danger after these surgeries, which are still not approved by many people at all because they're still in essence experimental, especially vaginoplasties. They are very experimental and can more often than not have serious side effects, especially I'm going to use some medical terms in this for sure, and I'm just again a warning before I go too far. I hate to do this, but I am going to be talking about pedophilia in parts of this. I will warn as soon as I get to it because I know that there are people that aren't, and it's not a trigger warning, it's just I know that there are people who have dealt with this or feel like they're crazy um, because of having dealt with stuff like this. But I am warning right now, before I go any further, I will be talking about pedophilia because it does relate in this documentary. Jazz Jennings went through a vaginoplasty after being on puberty blockers for multiple years. Puberty blockers basically stop puberty. The most popular one is Lupron, which is also used to irreversibly chemically castrate pedophiles and sex offenders in prison. Doesn't sound very reversible to you now, does it? And that is true. Look it up. Lupron was and still is used to chemically castrate pedophiles. So you're using the same thing that is used as a punishment for people who have molested or raped or done all these things to other people on a child who cannot consent to this because they are not an adult. This child cannot consent to sex. Why should they be able to consent to a sex change? And during the surgery, which was televised, thanks TLC for being as tasteless as always, Dr. Marcy Bowers burns, well, not burns, but ends up screwing up the vaginoplasty so bad that they have to bring Jazz in to do it a second time. Apparently, Jazz's penis wasn't big enough to create the faux vagina. I wonder why. You had them on puberty blockers. They weren't able to go through puberty beforehand. I wonder why it didn't work. So that is just a little bit of the tastelessness that is associated with this community. And if you say anything bad about it, you're called transphobic. You're you're a right-wing nut. I'm not even right-wing. I'm not. To be perfectly honest, both sides can go fuck themselves for a lot of things recently. Most people on the right aren't even conservative, and a lot of people on the left are like there are people on both sides that are complete fucking scumbags and complete two-faced pricks. So, I don't want to hear this right wing, like your right wing conspiracies. These are real things that happen on TV. Um, but yes, this same doctor who is supposedly a master at these surgeries, one of the leading physicians that or surgeons that do these surgeries, fucked up so bad that this child needed to come in again in order to get it. She also goes on to claim that a faux vagina, that is the vagina created using a man's penis, um, functions the exact same as a real vagina, which is a blatant lie because men do not have ovaries, they do not have eggs. Men cannot get pregnant. And if you want to say a trans man can get pregnant, they're not biologically a man. They are biologically female. I am not trying to be transphobic. I am just saying that saying like, no, did you know that men can get pregnant? Biological men cannot under any circumstances, to our knowledge currently. Um, but yeah, And Matt Walsh does end up asking Bowers, um, what if somebody wanted to identify as a man without an arm? And then she goes on to say, well, that's completely different. That is a mental disorder, which gender dysphoria is a mental disorder. So you're basically just admitting that a lot of the people dealing with this have a mental disorder. And I'm not saying that in a mean way. The transgender people I know that I love have gender dysphoria. And there seems to be this feeling of, oh, it has a negative connotation. No, it doesn't. That's just what they're going through. You're implying there's a negative connotation when it's just saying how it is. If you are genuinely trapped in the wrong body and you feel that way, then yes, you have gender dysphoria. If you're doing it to chase a trend because of TikTok, you are not. I feel pretty confident in saying that. Oh yeah. There's next is a guy, Don Susher of Susher and Sons. He owns a Star Wars shop. He put up a sign that says, "If you got a dick, you're not a chick." Um, Again, I'm not really gonna say like, "Oh, I agree with that," whatever. I'm just going to say it's an old guy. He clearly just doesn't give a fuck. It's it's a free country, free speech. Even if you want to say, "Oh, he's transphobic," it is a free country. So I don't know what else to tell you. It is a free country. He's allowed to say that, and he does bring up that he's never had any trouble with anybody until this congresswoman who was trans came in and made a big deal about it. Again, it's free speech. If he wants to say it, he can. I'm not defending it or against it. I'm just saying he's free speech. Then Michelle Forcier is a pediatrician who works with children who want to transition. She goes on to say that babies and infants understand gender identity. They do not. They are barely thinking. Uh, Matt Walsh makes the argument that young children have an active imagination because they believe in Santa Claus. So of course they'll all the time there's like boys who like girls' toys and girls who like boys' toys. That doesn't immediately make them gay. It doesn't make them trans. It doesn't make them anything. It is simply experimenting. And definitely I identified with that because when I was younger, I at times would, well, not dress like a girl, but I definitely wasn't into the whole like, oh yeah, let's get some chicks. I talked to girls all the time. I would always sit with girls predominantly at lunch because I felt like I identified more with them from an emotional standpoint because I am a very emotional person and I am not, I don't know, I just didn't sit well with the guys. I don't think it was specifically because I'm gay, but I don't know, I just felt like it was easier to talk to the girls. Um, but that did not mean that I was a girl. Just because you get along with the other gender better does not mean anything other than, oh, cool, you're better with girls. Fine. A lot of straight men will hang out with women, and a lot of straight women will hang out with men and be a perfectly fraternal, well, not fraternal, but you know what I mean. Like they'll just talk like buds. That's perfectly normal. Um, and she also goes on to say a chicken uh, has a chicken laying eggs that people would assign it female. These animals cannot consent to these farm animals that cannot talk cannot consent to stuff like that. If it's a chicken that lays an egg, it's a female. If it doesn't and can't, it is a male. Unless the female chicken is barren or something, but I'm not a farm expert, but if it's laying eggs, it's a female. There's no fucking contest on that. Um, oh yeah. The next one was Dr. Patrick um, Grzanka. He is a women, gender, and sexuality studies professor, and he becomes very aggressive very quick. Um, at no point is Matt Walsh raising his voice at these people. These people are raising his voice at him. It is very clear that these people either have very low tolerance for anything. They don't like being challenged, that's for sure. And um, this guy just becomes really whiny really fast. He's not answering the question of what is a woman. Uh, the professor says it's transphobic to say that someone could be mistaken about their gender. And then Matt Walsh goes on to say, what if I told you I was a black man? And Matt Walsh, looking at him very clearly, he is not a black man. And the professor goes on to ask if he is. He's like, are you? So he's clearly fucking deranged. He clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. And then his definition of what a woman is a person who identifies as a woman. He gives a circular definition that does not answer the question at all. A woman is a person who identifies as a woman. That doesn't make any sense. And I'm not even just saying this because I love Daily Wire, because I really don't. For the most part, I don't. I don't love Ben Shapiro. I don't. I'm not in love with Matt Walsh. He said some pretty stupid shit. He said that anime was uh demonic. All anime was demonic. I like Brett Cooper. I haven't listened to much Candace Owens. I don't know much about Jordan Peterson, and I don't know much about Jeremy Boring or Michael Knowles. Um, I've enjoyed a couple of their movies. This included. I loved Run Hide Fight. It is in my top 20 for now. But yeah, um, Miriam Grossman. She's an adolescent and adult psychiatrist. She goes on to say that transgenderism is linked with gender dysphoria, which is when a person loathes their own biological sex. She goes on to list the numbers of 1 in 30,000 and 1 in 110,000 um, being the ratio of transgender to not transgender people, which is insanely low. Um, Sex is a biology and unchanging. Gender is perception, a feeling, and recounts. Later, they talk about puberty blockers and children being put on puberty blockers before going through these surgeries, and a lot of them ending up failing because, again, the genitals have not grown to the size that they need to in order to do the vaginoplasty, especially on men and the women. Um, there's less complications dealing with women because it's still just um, removing their breasts. But she recounts a story of a woman who came in whose 14-year-old daughter was put on puberty blockers. And then 2 years later, she developed osteoporosis. This is a common thing that has been happening with children who are put on puberty blockers. Of course, people love to silence it. They're like, no, that's not what's happening. And it's very clear that when the bones are not growing during the time when they're supposed to be, which is the biggest growth any human goes through, which is puberty, then there's obviously going to be some issues. Even if you don't know anything about the subject, it's very clear that something will have to go wrong. Um, oh yeah. Next was Selena Soul. She's a track and field athlete, and she talks about how trans male athletes have or trans female athletes have an unfair advantage. Um, on the subject of that and what like people would be like, oh, what should they do? Should they compete with the gender that they don't associate with? Which trans women, that would be with the trans male or biological males, and the trans females would be with the males, or trans males would be with the females. Personally, I think they should have trans leagues, trans male and trans female leagues, not together but separated. I think that could be really cool. There's another YouTuber who is transgender on the, or transsexual, whatever, on YouTube named Blair White who brought that up, and I thought, yeah, that would be perfectly reasonable. So that all the biological men and women are happy, perfectly fine. Uh, I have no real issue with that idea. Um, but yeah, oh yeah, Rodrigo Hanglehtinen, who works for the Center for Transgender Equality, the National Center for Transgender Equality, says that trans athletes there is no evidence to support the fact to support them not being them having an advantage against people of the gender that they um, identify as. And then we go on to see a clip show of pretty notable examples of it, especially Leah Thomas, who is a trans woman. And then we go on to a teammate who chooses to stay anonymous of uh, Leah Thomas's. She says that while Leah does help the team do better as a team in athletic competitions, it doesn't feel as good as it would with a biological female. And I can understand this. You have someone with the advantage of testosterone and going through puberty as a man with women who don't have any testosterone in their bodies. Um, they aren't allowed to talk about having to change in changing rooms with someone who still has a penis. I can understand that. Just as a male, I can understand the uncomfortability with changing in a changing room with somebody who has different sexual organs than you. Um, that sounds insanely uncomfortable because when I was in high school, I always changed like away from everybody. I never did it in the main room because I was just like so uncomfortable having to do that. And I can understand it if like someone like me was to go into a female changing room and just like do that in front of everybody. I can understand them being very uncomfortable with that. And it sucks that these women were threatened basically to keep quiet about it or else they would lose their entire careers, which is just disgusting. You could equate that to or not Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein saying, "Oh, if you don't have sex with me, you're going to lose your career." That's basically the same thing. You have to put up with having to change with somebody who has a different sexual organs than you. Yeah, that's definitely assault. That person could also change in a stall, which pretty much every pretty much every locker room has stalls. They could easily do that. But no, they don't want to go the extra steps to make everyone else comfortable because they can only think about themselves. These specific people, not all transgender people. Um, and then we go on to the We Spa, a Korean spa in Los Angeles, and a controversy that happened there about trans people in the same or trans women in the same spaces as biological women. On June 24th, 2021, a woman posted a video to Instagram in which she had confronted staff at We Spa, a Korean spa in Los Angeles, about the presence of a nude individual with a penis, most commonly believed to be a trans woman, in the women's changing area of the spa. On August 30th, 2021, an individual commonly reported to be a transgender woman was charged with indecent exposure relating to the alleged incident after four women and one minor girl filed police reports in July 2021. The suspect had previously been convicted of indecent exposure in 2002 and 2003, being obliged to register as a sex offender since 2006, and convicted for failing to register in 2008. The suspect is awaiting trial on 7 counts of indecent exposure, according to court documents from 2019. The suspect has denied guilt, claiming harassment over being a trans person. You hide behind the identity. On February 12, 2023, a judge ruled that the indecent exposure case would proceed, citing the testimony of two witnesses that the individual in question had a partial or full erection for the duration of 30 to 60 minutes during the incident. I'm sorry, but that is unbelievable. I mean, I believe that happened, but it's just disgusting that something like that would be protected behind like that because there's plenty of trans people that just want to live a normal life, and then there's people like that who just want to make it seem like everyone else is crazy. Like they try to make it seem like transgender people are crazy when they do stuff like that. Um, we go to California Congressman Mark Takano, who is openly gay, apparently the first openly gay California congressman. Um, and the interview ends almost immediately after Matt Walsh talks about bathroom policies and the uncomfortability of biological women dealing with that, dealing with biological men or trans women going into the bathrooms who still have their penis and have not gone through sex change surgery. And he shuts it down almost immediately. Um, there's a random trans woman on the street who says that only people who should be asking what a woman is are women or trans women. And when Matt Walsh asks her if she could identify as a cat, she immediately walks away. So very childish. Um, he ends up going to the Women's March, and no one ends up answering what a woman is, which you'd think at a place called the Women's March or at a thing like that, someone would be able to answer you, but I guess not. Um, he ends up going to Africa and talking to this tribe, which was very interesting to see, in that these people live a very simple life, still starting fires with rod and wood, going out and hunting for their food. There's no supermarkets for a lot of these tribes, especially because like most of them are living in very poor conditions. Um, so they don't really want to tolerate any more bullshit because their lives are harder than pretty much any of us living in America. Um, he asks them what a man is supposed to do, and he is told that men are there to support the women, and women cannot do the duty of a man, and men cannot do the duty of women because that's how it is. Uh, and then we get to the bit harder to talk about stuff of the documentary. Two of the biggest leading doctors that had to do with transgenderism coming to the forefront of medicine are Dr. Alfred Kinsey and John Money. These two people are despicable human beings, no matter how you cut it. Dr. Alfred Kinsey said that children are all sexual from birth, which, to say that straight face, is pretty disgusting. Kinsey based his fraudulent evidence on data from child molesters and sexual predators in a prison. Uh, he also performed sexual experiments on children even under the age of 1. He his most popular book, and this is very hard to talk about. Again, if this is going to upset you, please go away from the video because this is really hard stuff that needs to be talked about to realize that there are some fucked up truths that need to be talked about within the trans and just sexual community. Book His book Sexual Behavior of the Human Male has a chart documenting the number of orgasms a child can have as young as 5 months old and up to the age of 14 or something. He is still celebrated as a pioneer of sexual studies. And I am shocked that he is still celebrated, given that people know about this and that it's still taught in schools that he's like this great guy. He's not. You had no right to do those things to those children at all. And then there's John Money, who's a psychologist at Johns Hopkins who coined the term gender identity. Uh, he had a theory that babies are born gender neutral and ended up testing it on two twin boys where one was raised as a girl. The first twin had his penis end up getting burned during the circumcision process, so the parents didn't know what to do. They turned to John Money, and he ended up using them for his sick, twisted experiments, where he made it so that one of them grew up as a girl, even though they were born as a boy, and the other one just grew up normal. Uh, He would then subject them to sexually abusive exercises, such as forcing them to perform sexual acts on each other as children. Again, he's a pedophile. Kinsey is a pedophile. A lot of the people in this business are pedophiles. Are all of them? No. But these people who are pioneers of sex change surgeries and sexuality as a whole, yes, they are. They're disgusting human beings. Bruce ended up not being able to accept his female identity and ended up speaking out about the abuse. There's a notable clip from Oprah shown, and it's very heartbreaking to watch. The one of them ended up dying of an overdose, and the other one committed suicide due to the deep emotional trauma of being forcefully reassigned their gender. And then you get to the most depressing part of the film. Scott Nugent was born male, ended up for a while being transitioned, had a faux vagina, and then ended up detransitioning and starting an organization called Trey Voices, which I think is a very important thing, which is meant for children to speak out about gender dysphoria and helping them find resources for coping with it or finding out what is wrong with them, finding out the issues. And when I say wrong with them, I mean physically and emotionally, not that they as a person are wrong for being dysphoric. That's not at all what I'm saying. I have the utmost respect for the this person, especially coming out about this, given that they will likely be lambasted as transphobic. Um, but it's an important part of the documentary for people to watch because he goes on to say that he had 6 inches of hair growing inside of his faux vagina, which was causing infections. He's taken countless antibiotics. He's had to go through so many different surgeries. He is basically going poor in order to keep up his life, and he's not even 40 yet, from what I remember. He may not live to be 40 because of this brainwashing. Again, not all trans people are brainwashed, but this brainwashing that caused his life to go down this spiral. And I have so much respect for this person for coming out about it, given that so many people who do detransition end up being censored online, um, especially through Twitter and YouTube. A lot of detransitioners don't really have a platform. People like Blair White championing or helping these people find coping mechanisms and talking to them and giving them a platform through her channel really are doing God's work here for the people who were used and abused through the system. And I have the utmost respect for people who have actually come out about that. Um, yeah. And then we get to a Canadian father who was put in jail for not consenting to his child receiving hormones. And in Canada, due to a newer bill, uh, the hospitals do not need parental consent to put children on hormones. He was then arrested for or fined $30,000 and arrested for misgendering his 13-year-old. And at the time this documentary came out, he was awaiting trial. I do not know what has happened to him for now. I just wanted to talk about what happens in the documentary. Um, and most of the reason that a lot of these surgeries have gone through nowadays is because apparently a lot of doctors do not address long-term consequences or long-term effects to your health of getting gender reassignment surgeries, or sex change surgeries, whatever term you want to use. And I think that's definitely very scummy. Um, if you're going to do something like that that is irreversible to a human, I believe that you should 100% tell them the truth about what they're going to go through. But yeah, um, then we go on to the trans community or queer community that believe that they're an animal. Um, Children in school pretending to be animals are supposedly queer in identity, which doesn't really make much sense. There are plenty of people in the furry community, which I'm not a part of the furry community. I know I have a cat uh as my profile picture. I just thought it looked cool, and a friend of mine that committed suicide did it for me, so I thought it was best to use that in his memory. Also because I thought it looked cool. Um, Basically, in these situations, if a student is meowing, say the student thinks they're a cat, and they start meowing at their teacher instead of answering a question. If the teacher were to say, "Stop that, stop being ridiculous," like a normal human being, they can be fired, they can be publicly lambasted. It has happened before. There are reports of certain schools having litter boxes in the bathrooms for the children to use, which disgusts me to my very fucking core. Um, and then we go on to Naya Okami, who claims to be able to claims to identify with wolves in every way but physical. There is a popular clip of this person you might have seen where they say, "In all ways except physical, I am a wolf," and then you see them barking. Uh, and at the very end of this, I do want to address something. And the last, the last thing I want to mention from this documentary before I finish off with a bit of an ender, because it is 47 minutes and I did not expect this to go that long. Matt Walsh, the creator of this documentary, created a book called Johnny the Walrus about a child who believes that he is a walrus. He ends up putting like wooden spoons in his teeth to pretend to be fangs, and basically made it kind of a parody of the disgusting LGBT literature that is put in children's libraries all the time nowadays. Um, and it ended up rising to the top of the LGBT charts on Amazon and then was subsequently removed from their platform. Um, Even though I have read the book and I was like, oh, perfect. It's about imagination. It's a very valid book. And I would definitely, if I had kids, read it to them. But the last thing I do want to mention, and it's something that I have become very aware of, I currently have a TikTok account, which I'm basically uploading my short reviews to that as well as to YouTube, and basically in order to get more people to come to my YouTube. Because I do want to grow my channel and have a family, basically, that I can like. Well, I mean, it's not like I'm gonna start like messaging anybody. I do have a Discord, but that hasn't really taken off. But other than like chatting publicly with people who are on here, I have noticed on TikTok a vast array of people who try to imply that being transgender is a trend, which it should not be. Acceptance, sure. Accepting that other people may not look exactly the same as other women or other men, fine. But when it gets to the point where you have someone saying they identify as a woman and they have a full beard, and then you question them and say, well, why do you have a full beard? Women, literally most women do not have beards or really any facial hair at all. Then you get attacked. It's a bit ridiculous to expect people to call you she, her when you have a full beard or a 5 o'clock shadow. And I really don't understand why it's that difficult. But on that topic still, um, the people who say like, oh, if you're a teenager and you feel like you're not fitting in, maybe you're in a different body, felt very fucking predatory to me as someone who did not fit in a lot in high school. And I ended up hanging out with the emo kids. I never ended up going through an emo phase, but I did identify with them a bit more, I guess. But just because you don't identify with every other kid does not mean you're transgender. That does not immediately mean that you are not the gender you were born with. It basically means that either you need psychological help, you need to see a therapist or something, and talk about what's going on inside your head, or really you're just unique. People are so afraid of being unique nowadays. They're so afraid of having their own identity that they'd rather latch on to something like, oh, I'm bi, I'm trans, I'm this. And when it comes to me, no, I did not follow a trend. Do I think that there is a big possibility that I was influenced by things like YouTube and things like, excuse me, lesson plans in school where they talked more and more about LGBT stuff? Yes, 100%. Do I think that movies and TV influenced me? Yes. I do think they influence a lot of people. I do think in many situations, sexuality is not really a choice, and when you're an impressionable child and you see all that stuff when you're that young, yes, I can really see fully and truly someone seeing that and latching on to it because they think it's the norm when it's not. So I can definitely feel for a lot of these people who feel like they don't fit in because I still don't feel like I fit in. Mostly because of my beliefs and the way I handle things where I try to be blunt and honest. Maybe I haven't been blunt enough in this video, but I've tried to be as respectful as possible. Um, on the terms of the documentary and how it's made, I'll just give a quick summary. I think it's very well made. At no point do I feel like our speaker, Matt Walsh, is being disrespectful. He is simply stating his opinion. He's not saying that if you're transgender, you're a terrible person or that you're immediately a pedophile, because that's not true. He's not saying that to twist his words into saying that that's what he's saying, you'd be being dishonest, not him. If he says that transgender women aren't women, I'm not going to say he's wrong or right because I don't have an opinion on it. Really. I don't. If you are happy, if you're legitimately happy in doing it to not to chase a trend, then yes, I am for you. If you're doing it just to chase a trend and just to be popular, which is the worst reason to do anything, because the popular thing isn't always the right thing. And I know that it's going to be an unpopular opinion for me to talk about this, and it might get taken off of YouTube, even though I've spent an entire hour talking about it. But free speech does exist. Nothing I've said in here is hate speech. And this documentary, if I'd change one small thing, I'd say that they could have had a couple people who have transitioned and are doing perfectly fine, having them talk about their experiences. But again, this is a documentary on the other side of things where you've had billions of transgender documentaries talking about how amazing it is and how everything is perfect, which is just simply not true. I'd rather have something that wasn't completely lying to me. But yeah, I do recommend this documentary. You can watch it through Daily Wire Plus. I found another way to watch it, but yeah, I think it's definitely an important watch. Even though I've described a lot of the things that happen in it, you won't truly get the experience of watching it until you've seen it yourself. So definitely go and watch that if this seems like an interesting um, subject to you. And yeah, I have now made the longest video on my channel, not including my lives. But yeah, um, again, sorry for getting emotional. But yeah, that was my review of the documentary What is a Woman. If you've seen the documentary and want to share your thoughts, please be civil in the comment section. Please no attacking anybody. If you see somebody that supports the documentary and start attacking them, I will fucking delete your comment and I will block you because that's not what I'm about. I'm not just going to allow anybody to get hurt, and if anybody attacks anybody who is against this documentary, I'm deleting you too and blocking you from the channel. Civil conversations, civil opinions. That's all I want. If you have any recommendations for other movies you want me to review, put those down in the comments as well. And movie reviewer next door,